this week for social studies using your My World Social Studies book. We are going to go over Chapter 8, Lesson 4. Chapter 8, Lesson 4, and that begins on page 302. All right, so the name of this lesson is Changes and Growth, and we're going to mainly be talking about the telephone. Okay, so look at the first illustration right there, or the photo, and it is talking about the new developments in communication, such as the telephone. They influenced economic activities in Texas. Okay, and obviously that's not a cell phone that we use now. It's an older telephone. All right, so we're going to be talking about the invention of it. Inventions bring change. The oil boom, and remember the oil boom is when Texas discovered oil, or Patillo Higgins discovered oil, and a lot of families were moving to Texas to make businesses. So now we're going to be talking about the inventions. So they brought big changes to Texas in the early 1900s. Many Texans lived on an urban life, and that is one of the vocabulary words, and that is life in a city. People who lived in cities such as Dallas saw life change rapidly. Inventions, newly created products, brought about the changes. Cities had electric lines first, and those were the cities. So people there had electric lights. That allowed them to work longer hours. The first telephone lines were in cities. That speeded up communication in businesses and everyday life. City people could use a telephone instead of writing letters or sending telegrams. Cities also built, let me move this. Cities also built electric streetcars. So the telephone is one. Two, electric streetcars, and they were called trolleys. That helped people get around quickly. In some parts of the state, however, the changes came slowly. Many Texans lived in rural life, and that was in the countryside. So remember, this one is urban. I'm going to write that down right here. And that meant city. And then this one is rural. Oops, sorry. And that meant country. For them, life went on much as it had before. Rural Texans, they used mules to pull their plows. They traveled in horse-drawn buggies, while the city, the urban, were using cars and tractors. They used firewood to heat and cook, and the rural homes had no electricity or indoor plumbing. Indoor plumbing are the bathrooms. So the city, now we're going to write this down right here. So the city was more advanced with inventions than the rural area. Okay? In other words, the city got it first. They got all the inventions first. All right. On the next page, page 303, cars also changed the way people lived. So now we're talking about cars. By 1910, cars were a common sight on Texas roads. The use of cars grew so quickly that by the 1920s, cities began to install traffic signs, and they began to write laws controlling speed the way that we have them now. New people and new opportunities. Of course, we're still getting travelers to come and live in Texas. They're planning on staying, creating a business. Many people move to Texas. Look at the bar graph. It shows that Texas's population grew more than 1.5 million people between 1900 and 1920. Let's look at the bar graph. So between 1870 and 1920, here is the bar graph, and it's below 1 million. And if we look all the way to 1920, it is almost, and if I draw the line, it is a little bit more than 4.5 million, almost 5 million. Okay? Many new Texans came from other states, and we read about that in the other lesson. Others immigrated from Mexico and other nearby countries. Some came from faraway nations, so they came from Mexico, nearby countries. They might have come from Europe, or they did come from Europe, Asia, and Africa. The artist Elizabeth Ney came to Texas from Germany, a country in Europe. Ney carved the sculpture of Sam Houston and Stephen F. Austin that stand in our state capitol. And you know that Sam Houston and Stephen F. Austin is known as the father of Texas, and Sam Houston was the person that helped create the government of Texas. What brought the newcomers to Texas cities? The cities, they offered theaters, concerts, and cultural opportunities. There were good schools and hospitals. Most important, however, were the economic opportunities. In other words, how they could make money. People usually move to Texas cities to find well-paying jobs. The effects of immigration were to put more people to work in the new industries growing in Texas. So if we look at the question, number 3, it says identify and underline the 3 reasons why people moved to Texas. And the 3 reasons were good schools and hospitals, 1. There were theaters, concerts, and cultural opportunities, that's 2. And then economic opportunities. Those are the 3 reasons why people moved to Texas. All right, page 304. Growing industries. Jobs were available in Texas industries. An industry, there's another vocabulary word, is a group of businesses that makes a type of product or provides a type of service. Thanks to the railroads and the discovery of oil, many Texas industries grew fast. Remember, the railroads made it travel quicker and further, and oil made it more economical than to be using coal and steam on the trains. The oil industry was booming because they had just discovered oil. Many people moved to Houston to work in the oil refineries. Others worked in the Gulf Coast port cities shipping oil overseas. Later, the natural gas industry created many jobs. Workers were needed to build gas pipelines to Texas cities. Okay? So one thing that they were job that they had was working in the oil refineries. A second job was shipping oil overseas, and another type of job that they were getting was building gas pipelines to Texas cities. Meat packing was another growing industry. Okay, so here we've got the oil industry, and now we've got meat packing. Fort Worth was the center of the cattle trade. The cattle industry impacted the meatpacking industry. As more cattle were raised to sell, it led to a need for more meatpacking plants. Large meatpacking plants there hired many workers. These workers, they slaughtered cattle and prepared meat for shipping to market. Many Texans found jobs in manufacturing. It's another type of job. To manufacture, vocabulary word, is to make or process goods, especially by machine, in large quantities. By 1910, Texas had a number of cotton mills. Logging, here's a fourth type of job. Logging companies and sawmills were active in East Texas. Sawmill towns sprang up there to house workers. Lufkin became the center of the growing lumber industry. That was the center. Businesses in Lufkin made and sold supplies to companies and workers who were cutting down the big pine forest in East Texas. All right, so we're going to write a little bit of notes right here. And we're going to do the locations of jobs. So in the Gulf Coast, they had the oil industry. Then in Fort Worth, had the meatpacking industry. Then we had the Lufkin, or let's put East Texas, and that was also Lufkin. And they had the logging companies. Oops, sorry. All right. New inventions help industry. Cans, like those in your grocery store, were another invention. They kept food from spoiling. Canneries filled the cans with food and sealed them airtight. Now people in other parts of the United States and the world could eat food grown in Texas. It says, explain the impact of the oil and gas industry upon industrialization and urbanization in each city below. All right, so you will just go ahead and answer those for Houston, the Gulf Coast, and Fort Worth, which we went over already in our little notes. Assembly lines and mass production. Henry Ford began to make automobiles in Detroit, Michigan in 1903. At first, Ford's workers could only make a few cars a day. Then Ford put in a moving assembly line. An assembly line moves a product past workers who stay in place. Each worker specializes in one small task. Breaking down a big job into small parts like this is called a division of labor. Ford's factory could make a car in about every 90 minutes. This is called mass production. In 1913, Henry Ford brought his new technology to Texas. He opened a car factory in Deep Ellum near Dallas. The impact of mass production and specialization on the economic growth of Texas was huge. Mass production, specialization, and the division of labor let factories produce more goods and produce them cheaply. This meant that more people could buy more cheaply